Hi, hello, and welcome to week 5. Okay, so as you're probably aware, this week is the last workshop week on the classical arguments. Okay, so this will be the proofreading and editing workshop. Uh, but what I wanted to talk with you about today in terms of this lecture is I want to talk about applying debate technique to argument. Now, the main thing you might think about with debate is that it's mostly verbal in nature. It's usually oral. People are getting up on a stage and they're having a debate. They're usually presenting their arguments in a spoken fashion. Now, you can apply some of the techniques that you are commonly used for commonplace debating. You can also apply them to argument because a lot of the concepts are similar and a lot of the rhetorical issues that you have to deal with are similar. So let's take a look at how we can apply some debate technique. So the first question is, what is debate? Okay. Now, you might have passing familiarity with debating from political debates where candidates make the case for their election. That's primarily the times that you hear debate being used. Okay. Debate is basically a performative form of argument where oratory skills become equally as important as the point you are making and the logic you bring to bear for your argument. Okay, so the way you present yourself and the manner in which you show your argument, that's going to impact the way your argument is perceived. Okay, how you present it. Now, the thing is that the way this is similar, debaters are still reliant on the main logical appeals. They have to appeal to pathos, ethos, and logos. They're just as reliant on those as writers of written arguments. Okay? Now, debaters are also still just as prone to logical fallacies. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit later on here about what kind of specific logical fallacies are to be avoided when you're doing a verbal debate. Okay? So what you want to do here is look at how debates work because some of the elements can be applied to parts of any argument essay. Okay, so we're going to get an overview today of how a verbal debate works, what kind of things to look for in a debate, and how those apply to your work. Okay, so let's take a look at the basics of how verbal debate is supposed to work. Alright, so debate has a particular structure in terms of how topics are chosen and arguments are cited. Now, the basic debate structure, what everybody uses in a regular debate, okay, this would be like a competitive debate, okay, goes like this. So first off, you have a chosen topic. It's typically called the resolution or the motion. In the case of classical arguments and most other written forms, this is going to be the premise of the argument. This is what you're going to try to argue, okay? In a competitive debate setting, your debaters are going to be given a topic and are on a affirmative or a negative side. Okay, so the teams are arguing affirmative and negative. In debate competitions, it's usually determined by a coin flip. So there's no guarantee you're going to agree with the side you wind up on, but you will still have to argue on its behalf. Okay, that's one of the big challenges of debate is sometimes you actually have to argue for a side that you don't agree with. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about debates. Okay, competitive debates like high school debate teams and stuff like that, they're treating it as a sport, so everything has to be fair and above board. You don't know ahead of time what side you're debating, so you have to prepare for both. Okay, so after the teams are given their sides, they have an hour to prepare and speak for set time limits per member. So typically, a debate's going to run in 3 rounds. Okay, so you have one set of speakers that goes, and that's 1 round. The next set of speakers goes, that's the 2nd round. Next set of speakers goes, that's the 3rd round. Okay. Now, the other thing is speakers alternate between sides. However, the affirmative side always goes first. Okay, so whoever is on the yes side of whatever the topic is, they're always going to be the one who goes first in every round. Okay, they have the advantage that they're the first ones to speak. However, the negative has the advantage is that they give to have the final word. Okay, now The audience the debaters are primarily tailoring their arguments toward is the debate judge. Okay? Doesn't matter who else is observing the debate, the one person that has to be swayed is the judge of the debate. Okay? While the judge is supposed to solely judge the quality of the arguments made, inherent biases may come into play. Okay? So, keep in mind that you have to know your audience, so that means you need to know who your judge is and what kind of predispositions that judge has. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about the speaker roles. Because the team is usually made up of 3 speakers for each side, there's a particular role and order for each member of the team. Okay? So, first round, you have the first affirmative and the first negative. Now, first affirmative contextualizes the debate. Okay, they're telling you what we're debating, what is the topic, what is the context of it. Sets out the team's interpretation. How do they see the other side of the topic? What are they going to try to argue? Okay. Defines the terminology if necessary. If there's any kind of terms that need to be known ahead of time so that the audience, that is, say, the debate judge, understands the argument better. Okay, they're going to lay out what that terminology is so that they know what the definition that that team is working with of that term is. Okay, they outline the argument and the team split. Okay, so they're going to tell specifically what they're arguing, the affirmative on the topic, what that entails for that specific topic, and then they'll tell you who's going to be delivering which part of that topic. Okay, which part of that argument. So they're going to say I will deliver the first part of this. Okay, then my friend James over here is going to present the second part, and then our friend Marilyn is going to present the third and final part. Okay, so they will tell who's delivering what. You have to give an overview of what they're going to talk about, and then the first affirmative provides 2 to 3 arguments supporting the motion. Okay, so they do have to have some arguing. It's not all introduction. Okay, now we get to the first negative. He goes after first positive. First negative recontextualizes the debate as a rebuttal to affirmative. Okay, so they're going to give the context as they see it. Okay, the context as how the negative side sees it. Okay, they're going to rebut what affirmative has to say about it, including differing definitions. If there are some terms that have some dispute as to what the definition of them are, the first negative will actually outline their definitions of those terms. Okay? Outlines the argument and the team split. So just like the first affirmative, they're going to tell who's giving what part of the argument. Rebut the argument made by first affirmative. Okay? Basically say where they got it wrong. Okay? What are the problems that you have with their logic? What problems do you have with their presentation? Then you provide 2 to 3 arguments opposing the motion. Okay, so now you got to bring your own arguments to the table. The seconds for each team are going to rebut the previous speaker. They're going to clarify definitional issues and deliver 2 to 3 more arguments. Okay, so each second has to rebut the previous speaker. Okay, so second affirmative is going to rebut the first negative. Second negative is going to rebut the second affirmative. Okay? And then you're going to add more reasonings, more arguments to the initial case. Okay? Now, the thirds for each team specifically rebut the seconds, specifically respond to attacks from the opposition, and conclude with a brief summary of their team's argument and reasoning. So the thirds are going to be the concluding side. Okay? The thirds are going to present the conclusion of each argument, and are going to actually go out of their way to try to rebut whatever the seconds have said. Okay, they're going to, in the case of the third negative, they also get to rebut the third positive. Okay, they specifically respond to any attacks that have been made by the opposition in terms of attacking their logic, attacking their approach, attacking their viewpoint, anything like that, and concludes with a brief summary of the argument and reasoning behind their team's side. Okay? From there, it goes to the judges, and the judges decide who did a better job of being persuasive. Okay? So that's how competitive debate works. So now you might be asking yourself, how does this apply to written arguments? Well, here's how it works. It can be argued that each of the members of the debate team is producing their own short argumentative essay and presenting it orally. But let's look at the full debate holistically and compare it to a written argument. So we're going to look at the whole package for one side or the other, not the whole thing together. We're going to look at either the affirmatives or the negatives. Look at each member, put them together as a package. Okay, so the firsts are presenting the background for the argument and its bigger picture meaning. Okay, although there is a bit of dispute that takes place between them, it also emphasizes the differences between the sides. Okay, so the firsts are acting as the introduction. They're giving the background, they're establishing the rhetorical situation, they're establishing what the argument's going to be, they're establishing what viewpoint the arguer has. Okay, and they emphasize where they differ from the opposition. The seconds are presenting organized arguments to support the team's main premise, using logical reasoning and evidence to support the premise. They are also rebutting the opposition using logical reasoning and evidence. Okay, so this is the second is basically acting as the body of a classical argument essay. Okay, they are going through their arguments one by one. They're giving the reasons for their arguments. They're giving the evidence that proves those reasons true. Okay, then they're also taking a look at the opposition and being fair, looking at how they see the issue and trying to determine what kind of stuff they have wrong and trying to rebut that. Okay, now, however, again, if the opposition is using facts that both sides can agree to, that both sides have agreed to, you need to acknowledge that. Okay, you can't just say that they're lying if they're actually quoting fact. So the thirds are offering the fullest rebuttal possible to the opposition while also concluding their team's argument with a brief summary and overview. It would also be their job to offer the parting shot that conclusions call for, to convince the audience to keep the argument in mind. Okay, so the thirds are acting kind of as partly as your rebuttal and partly as your conclusion. Okay, they are going to have the best shot at being memorable, so they need to present the argument in a concise way, in a clear manner that's going to be understood by the audience, that the audience is going to remember. Okay, so that's much like your conclusion is going to act. Let's look at the basic debate argument structure. The very basic structure that debaters use for their arguments is also highly helpful for writers. Okay, debaters typically set up their argument structure in three parts. Okay, claim, evidence, impact. Okay, so the claim is presenting the argument in a clear manner with a clear statement. Okay, so whatever argument they're trying to make, whatever reason they're trying to present for being on that side of the argument, they're going to present that reason in a clear way and use a clear, explicit statement to make it clear what their reason is. Okay. Next is evidence. The facts supporting the claim, including statistics, references, quotes, and so on. Okay. Whatever evidence that you're using, whatever factual evidence you're using to back up your reasons, your claims, that's what you have to put here. Okay. Third, impact. What significance each piece of evidence has for the claim. Okay, so for each piece of evidence, the debater is going to say, how does this make my claim more true? How does this make my claim more right? Okay, how does this make me more authoritative? Now, claims in this case would be equivalent to reasons for supporting a side of an argument. Thus, this structure could be used for each part of an argument essay and offer a logical backing for the ideas presented. Okay, so your claims are going to be your reasons. Okay, present your reason, give the evidence, and show how that evidence makes your claim that much truer. Okay, that's a basic debate structure, and it's also a basic way to handle a classical argument reasoning. Let's talk about rebuttal. Okay, In a debate setting, rebuttal is typically limited to pointing out the logical shortcomings of the opposition and how claims may not hold up to tighter scrutiny. Okay? A lot of what rebuttal winds up being in debates tends to be looking at logical fallacies or calling the opposition on points that they promised to make but they never did. Okay? So the most typical fallacies presented in competitive debates are similar to ones that appear in written arguments as well. Now, when I made up these slides, I was going off of a website that I've actually forgotten the website, which is bad on me. But the website was basically telling you how to approach a competitive debate. And it was actually made for British debate teams. Okay? But it had a big list of fallacies. A number of them were specific to in-person debate. However, the ones I'm presenting here are ones that are sometimes committed in written arguments. So these are some things that you need to avoid, and these are some things that you could try to call any opposition research on. Okay? So let's take a look at some of these. One of these is the false dichotomy fallacy, which is also called the either-or fallacy, also called the black or white fallacy. Splitting the debate into a two-sided issue when there are multitudes of other options. Okay? There's a lot of different options in any argument. There's never usually only two sides. Okay? There's nuance. Okay? You have to be aware of that. I have assertion. Statements that are not backed by evidence, typically assumptions. Okay? I can tell you that in the news lately, there's been a lot of examples of assertion. If you talk to anybody who believes in any kind of conspiracy theory, they're going to be using this assertion fallacy. They're basically presenting without evidence their theory that what's going on is going on. Yes, they demand evidence, and they will hem and haw and heave and hoe and do whatever they can to avoid giving you that evidence because it doesn't exist. Okay? The morally flawed fallacy. Statements and arguments that are questionable in their distribution of fairness and or morality. Okay? You don't really think about this, but there is the possibility that you might be arguing something and another person is going to call you on the fact that the point that you're trying to argue is just plain immoral. Okay? Now, this can get into a touchy area where people are going to have different sets of moral codes. But if it's something that is obviously, like, really blatantly immoral, okay, like in order to save this, endangered forest, we have to kill 20,000 people. Okay, there's got to be another option there. Okay. One good thing to think about with the morally flawed fallacy, there is an entire moral conundrum that falls into this morally flawed fallacy. Okay, if you've ever heard of the trolley problem, okay, you're on a trolley, it's going down the tracks. There is a fork in the track coming up. Okay. On one fork, there is one person that's tied up on the rails. On the other fork, there are 5 people tied up on the rails. Which way do you go? Okay? Which side do you go? That's the question. Okay? Do you kill the 1 to save the 5? Or do you kill the 5 to save the 1? Now, this gets into moral issues about who that one person is, who those 5 people are, what kind of mitigating circumstances there might be. Okay, in fact, they made an entire party game out of this. Okay, nobody ever considers that maybe the better option would be just to hit the brake. Okay, because your initial choices are both morally flawed, fallacious arguments. If you just stop the trolley, you're not going to have to make that choice. Okay? So there you go. Next one, correlation versus causation. Okay? This is called the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. Just because it rains every time Mary comes to a picnic doesn't mean we don't invite Mary to the picnic. Okay? Mary does not control the weather. Okay? So whether you invite Mary to the picnic or not is irrelevant to whether it's going to rain. Okay? You just need to watch the weather a bit closer. Okay? So don't commit this correlation versus causation, because you have to make sure that if you are going to say one thing causes the other, that it actually has to cause the other. There has to be evidence that that does it. Okay? Not just circumstantial or coincidence. Okay? Here's one that might be specific to debate, but you can also use it in written. Failure to deliver promises. The speaker has promised evidence that they have not produced. Okay? Again, this falls into the realm of conspiracy theories lately, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there where there have been demands for evidence, and the evidence has been promised. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Okay, where is it? Nobody's seen it. Nobody's seen the evidence. Okay, that's a failure to deliver promises fallacy. We have a straw man fallacy, creating a false, exaggerated version of the opposition that's easier to attack. Okay? This is particularly bad because it shows up in modern politics a lot. What you're basically doing is setting up a caricature of your opponent and trying to say, oh, this person is bad because they said this thing, and what they actually said was something totally unrelated, but you conflated it into that. Okay? Your logical fallacy is, okay, has an example of this where it talks about two political candidates on the stage. One says that he wants to increase the education budget. The other one says, I can't believe my opponent wants to leave us undefended by slashing the defense budget. First guy did not say that. He just said he wanted to increase money to education. Second guy just assumed that he was going to do it by taking away money from defense. Okay? And then he attacked him on that because it was going to be easier for him to attack him on taking away money from defense than it would be to attack him for adding money to education. Okay? It's the only way he could argue without making himself look bad. Okay? Then we have the contradiction fallacy, presenting two conflicting arguments that cancel each other out, thus reducing the side's credibility. Okay? This is especially present in debate, in competitive debate, when you have multiple debaters going, okay, and sometimes maybe they don't coordinate well enough on their arguments, so one person presents a claim, and then the second person presents a claim that actually directly conflicts with that first claim. So if you have a situation like that where somebody is contradicting themselves, okay, call them on it. All right? At the same time, don't contradict yourself either. Okay, don't make it so that you're presenting evidence for a reason that you're immediately going to disprove in the next paragraph. Next one, compare the conclusion to reality. Okay, this is a fun one. The conclusion presented is oversimplified and may have further complications put into effect, which basically means you're calling the opposition on not looking at the bigger picture. Okay, you're trying to say, hey, they're trying to say this is what's going to happen, but they're not looking at the wider implications of things. Okay, they're not looking at how this is going to affect other things down the line. Okay, they're not looking at the fact that they are going to just wreck something else if their goes through. They're just oversimplifying things. A really good example of this is the recent controversy over Keystone XL pipeline. Okay, the permits for that, of which were recently revoked. Okay, so no more construction can take place on that. Okay, people are getting up in arms about this because it says it's costing jobs. Okay, but that could be this comparative conclusion to reality fallacy. Okay, because if you look at the bigger picture, yeah, you've got 2,000 people building this pipeline. Okay. And yeah, it's going to stimulate some economies. Okay, but you're not looking at the bigger picture. One, that oil is not staying in the U.S. That pipeline is going from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. Okay? Two, once that pipeline is built, it's designed so that it can be run by 35 people. Which means if you've got 2,000 plus working on it, that's going to be 2,000 plus people that are out of jobs once that pipeline is complete. Okay? So, you're not looking at the bigger picture here. It's a temporary fix, okay, for employment, stuff like that. But you're not going to get into oil, and all those people that you're hiring are going to be let go after it's done, and now what are you going to do? Okay? So looking at it in terms of it creates jobs, that's oversimplifying things. It's like, okay, it creates jobs as long as we're building it, but once it's done, what then? Okay? All right, so that's what you have to look at for rebuttal, okay? Especially in a verbal debate. But this also helps when you're trying to craft your rebuttals for an argument. All right, so some important skills that you need to have if you're ever going to get into a verbal debate. And these also apply, again, to written debate. For a debater to be successful, there's some elements that need to be present in their argument. For the purposes of writing arguments, though, it comes down to these points, okay? So I want you to remember these points. So, first, make the points relevant to the topic, okay? Any of the reasoning that you present for your argument has to be relevant to the topic at hand, okay? It can't be some tertiary divergence from what your initial subject matter was. It has to be directly related to the main topic. Okay? Provide evidence when you can, not just your own personal opinion. Again, facts are going to help with your logic. If you can back up your reasoning with fact, it's all the better. Remain objective when arguing. Passionate arguments can become illogical, so control your emotions. Okay? Now, it kind of goes against what I've said before in the past when I've said that if you feel something for a subject, you're going to write better about it. Okay? Yeah, that's true. But also at the same time, there's a possibility that you could feel too passionately about it and start spewing arguments that have no basis in logic. It's basically just what you think. Okay? So when you're actually doing a classical argument, you have to be in control. You have to be in control of your emotions. You have to be in control of your logical faculties. Okay? You have to be able to back up what you say. Consider the audience's attention span. Okay? Keep in mind that different audiences will have a different amount of time that they can listen to people before they get bored and move on to something else. Okay? For most people nowadays, it usually winds up being at most approximately 2 hours. Okay? If they have to spend any longer thinking about an argument, they're probably not going to want to deal with it anymore. Okay? That's why if you look at political debates, typically they're moving from subject to subject to subject fairly quickly. It's because the people don't have the attention span for an extended debate about certain topics. Okay? Use pathos, ethos, and logos to support your rhetoric. Okay? Just like in a written, okay? Same thing. Appeals to emotion, appeals to credentials, appeals to intelligence, appeal to logic. Okay, all of it has to color your logic. All of it has to color your rhetoric. Employ comparative thinking. How would things be different if the opposition wins or status quo remains versus if you win? Okay, what's going to happen? Think about it in terms of hypotheticals. Now, you want to be careful because there is a logical fallacy related to this called the slippery slope, where you're trying to say that if A happens, then Z will happen, but there's no clear evidence showing the path from A to Z. Okay? Comparative thinking is basically just saying, what do you think is going to happen based in evidence, based in fact, based in what's already happened? What is going to happen if the situation continues the way it is, or if your opposition wins, versus if you win, if you win the argument. Okay? Next one, keep your language simple. Okay? Don't try to go too intelligent. Don't try to go too highfalutin. Okay? Keep your language simple, conversational. Okay? It has to be formal for academic essays, but you can still make it sound somewhat conversational. Okay? Here's another one. Avoid hyperbole. Don't use terms like always or never. Okay? Don't describe anything as the hugest, the biggest, the greatest, whatever. Okay? That's hyperbole. Okay? Hyperbole is basically any phrase that you use to try to inflate the value of something. Okay, when it really there's no evidence to support that inflation. Okay, so as much as possible, do not use hyperbolic language. Okay. Avoid fallacious argument techniques. Okay, there are 3 here that you especially do not want to employ. One of them, for sure, falsifying data or evidence. Okay, that's an instant no. Okay, you've lost all credibility once you start faking things. Okay. The story goes related to falsifying data. That's how the entire anti-vax movement started, was through falsified data from a paper by a British doctor named Andrew Wakefield. When he was writing for The Lancet, he did a study on an MMR vaccine to try to show that it had a relation to increased risk of autism. But the problem was that he falsified his data. Okay. And there was also a lot of other problems with that. There's ethical problems with it because he was actually paid to do the study by a competing pharmaceutical company who wanted to market their own MMR. Okay, and there was also procedural issues in that he had not used a large enough sample size. Okay, so falsifying data is going to get you in trouble. It definitely got him in trouble. He lost his medical license. Now, he still speaks on the anti-vax speaker circuit, but he's not going to, and people will come to him to be a doctor, but he's not a legit doctor. Okay? Attacking the arguer for the opposition rather than the opposing argument. Okay? This is known as the ad hominem fallacy, where you're attacking the man as opposed to attacking the issue or the argument. Okay? Do not levy personal insults. Okay, we just got done with 4 years of having a chief executive that did this exact thing all the time. Okay, and it basically set back American rhetoric approximately 100 years. Okay, so do not, under any circumstances, levy direct insults to the opposing arguer. Okay. Same with the third one. Disagreeing with facts or obvious truths. Okay? Anything that has been certified as a fact, anything that has been independently verified as a fact, has to be accepted as a fact. You cannot just say, oh, this hurts my feelings, so I'm not going to accept it as a fact. You must be lying. No, fact is fact. Okay? You can't get around that. Alright, so I want to go ahead and show you some examples of debate, and this is actually how we're going to wrap this up today. We're going to take a look at some examples of how debate is supposed to look. Okay, and what I've chosen is three videos that show you examples of political debate from 20th and 21st century. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do. Some typical example of how the average person experiences debate is through political debates. Okay, I want you to look at these debate examples for elements we've talked about in this lecture. And when you do, I want you to post your observations to the thread under the on the discussion board for this week's exercise. Okay, so we have 3 videos here. I'll give you some background on each one of these as I know it. Okay, but what I want you to do is take a look at what I'm going to show you. And I want you to pick out elements that we've talked about in this lecture about debate and see how that applies to that particular debate. Alright, so as you can see at the top of the screen here, this is the first presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon in 1960. Okay, from September 26, 1960. Now, this debate is historic in the fact that it's the first debate that was ever broadcast on nationwide television. In fact, most of the networks actually carried this debate. The version that you're going to have here is the version that NBC showed. Now, what's interesting about this is that it was also simulcast on the radio. And based on what media you saw or you took in this debate through, that tended to determine who you thought was the winner. Because the TV audiences felt that Kennedy won, but in general, the radio audiences felt that Nixon won. Okay? So, what I'm going to actually do is going to play you their opening statements. Okay? This video itself, I'm going to link in the media resources on this video. This what I'm playing here is the entire debate. It runs about an hour. Okay? We don't have that kind of time for this, so I'm just going to play their opening statements, and then we're going to move on. But I want you guys to listen for elements that we've been talking about in this lecture about debate.
Good evening. The television and radio stations of the United States and their affiliated stations are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues in the current political campaign by the two major candidates for the presidency. The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy. According to rules set by the candidates themselves, each man shall make an opening statement of approximately 8 minutes duration and a closing statement of approximately 3 minutes duration. In between, the candidates will answer or comment upon answers to questions put by a panel of correspondents. In this, the first discussion in a series of 4 joint appearances, the subject matter has been agreed will be restricted to internal or domestic American matters. And now for the first opening statement by Senator John F. Kennedy.
Smith, Mr. Nixon. In the election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln said the question was whether this nation could exist, half slave or half free. In the election of 1960, and with the world around us, the question is whether the world will exist, half slave or half free, whether it will move in the direction of freedom, in the direction of the road that we are taking, or whether it will move in the direction of slavery. I think it will depend in great measure upon what we do here in the United States, on the kind of society that we build, on the kind of strength that we maintain. We discussed tonight domestic issues, but I would not want that to be any implication to be given that this does not involve directly our struggle with Mr. Khrushchev for survival. Mr. Khrushchev is in New York, and he maintains the communist offensive throughout the world because of the productive power of the Soviet Union itself. The Chinese communists have always had a large population, but they are important and dangerous now because they are mounting a major effort within their own country. The kind of country we have here, the kind of society we have, the kind of strength we build in the United States will be the defense of freedom. If we do well here, if we meet our obligations, if we're moving ahead, then I think freedom will be secure around the world. If we fail, then freedom fails. Therefore, I think the question before the American people is, are we doing as much as we can do? Are we as strong as we should be? Are we as strong as we must be if we're going to maintain our independence? And if we're going to maintain and hold out the hand of friendship to those who look to us for assistance, to those who look to us for survival? I should make it very clear that I do not think we're doing enough, that I am not satisfied as an American with the progress that we're making. This is a great country, but I think it could be a greater country. And this is a powerful country, but I think it could be a more powerful country. I'm not satisfied to have 50% of our steel mill capacity unused. I'm not satisfied when the United States had last year the lowest rate of economic growth of any major industrialized society in the world, because economic growth means strength and vitality. It means we're able to sustain our defenses. It means we're able to meet our commitments abroad. I'm not satisfied when we have over $9 billion worth of food, some of it rotting, even though there is a hungry world, and even though 4 million Americans wait every month for a food package from the government, which averages 5 cents a day per individual. I saw cases in West Virginia, here in the United States, where children took home part of their school lunch in order to feed their families, because I don't think we're meeting our obligations towards these Americans. I'm not satisfied when the Soviet Union is turning out twice as many scientists and engineers as we are. I'm not satisfied when many of our teachers are inadequately paid, or when our children go to school part-time shifts. I think we should have an educational system second to none. I'm not satisfied when I see men like Jimmy Hoffa in charge of the largest union in the United States, still free. I'm not satisfied when we are failing to develop the natural resources of the United States to the fullest. Here in the United States, which developed the Tennessee Valley and which built the Grand Coulee and the other dams in the northwest United States, at the present rate of hydropower production, and that is the hallmark of an industrialized society, the Soviet Union by 1975 will be producing more power than we are. These are all the things, I think, in this country that can make our society strong or can mean that it stands still. I'm not satisfied until every American enjoys his full constitutional rights. If a Negro baby is born, and this is true also of Puerto Ricans and Mexicans in some of our cities, he has about 1/2 as much chance to get through high school as a white baby. He has 1/3 as much chance to get through college as a white student. He has about 1/3 as much chance to be a professional man, about 1/2 as much chance to own a house. He has about 4 times as much chance that he'll be out of work in his life as the white baby. I think we can do better. I don't want the talents of any American to go to waste. I know that there are those who say that we want to turn everything over to the government. I don't at all. I want the individuals to meet their responsibilities. And I want the states to meet their responsibilities. But I think there is also a national responsibility. The argument has been used against every piece of social legislation in the last 25 years. The people of the United States individually could not have developed the Tennessee Valley. Collectively, they could have. A cotton farmer in Georgia, or a peanut farmer, or a dairy farmer in Wisconsin or Minnesota, he cannot protect himself against the forces of supply and demand in the marketplace, but working together in effective governmental programs, he can do so. 17 million Americans who live over 65 on an average Social Security check of about $78 a month. They're not able to sustain themselves individually, but they can sustain themselves through the Social Security system. I don't believe in big government, but I believe in effective governmental action. And I think that's the only way that the United States is going to maintain its freedom. It's the only way that we're going to move ahead. I think we can do a better job. I think we're going to have to do a better job if we are going to meet the responsibilities which time and events have placed upon us. We cannot turn the job over to anyone else. If the United States fails, then the whole cause of freedom fails. And I think it depends in great measure on what we do here in this country. The reason Franklin Roosevelt was a good neighbor in Latin America was because he was a good neighbor in the United States. Because they felt that the American society was moving again. I want us to recapture that image. I want people in Latin America and Africa and Asia to start to look to America, to see how we're doing things, to wonder what the President of the United States is doing, and not to look at Khrushchev or look at the Chinese communists. That is the obligation upon our generation. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt said in his inaugural that this generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny. I think our generation of Americans has the same rendezvous. The question now is, can freedom be maintained under the most severe attack it has ever known? I think it can be. And I think in the final analysis, it depends upon what we do here. I think it's time America started moving again.
And now the opening statement by Vice President Richard M. Nixon.
Mr. Smith, Senator Kennedy, the things that Senator Kennedy has said, many of us can agree with. There is no question but that we cannot discuss our internal affairs in the United States without recognizing that they have a tremendous bearing on our international position. There is no question but that this nation cannot stand still because we are in a deadly competition, a competition not only with the men in the Kremlin, but the men in Peking. We're ahead in this competition, as Senator Kennedy, I think, has implied. But when you're in a race, the only way to stay ahead is to move ahead. and I subscribe completely to the spirit that Senator Kennedy has expressed tonight, the spirit that the United States should move ahead. Where then do we disagree? I think we disagree on the implication of his remarks tonight and on the statements that he has made on many occasions during his campaign to the effect that the United States has been standing still. We heard tonight, for example, the statement made that our growth in national product last year was the lowest of any industrial nation in the world. Now, last year, of course, was 1958. That happened to be a recession year. But when we look at the growth of GNP this year, a year of recovery, we find that it's 6 9/10% and one of the highest in the world today. More about that later. Looking then to this problem of how the United States should move ahead and where the United States is moving, I think it is well that we take the advice of a very famous campaigner. Let's look at the record. Is the United States standing still? Is it true that this administration, as Senator Kennedy has charged, has been an administration of retreat, of defeat, of stagnation? Is it true that as far as this country is concerned, in the field of electric power, in all of the fields that he has mentioned, we have not been moving ahead? Well, we have a comparison that we can make. We have the record of the Truman administration of 7.5 years and the 7.5 years of the Eisenhower administration. When we compare these two records in the areas that Senator Kennedy has discussed tonight, I think we find that America has been moving ahead. Let's take schools. We have built more schools in these last 7.5 years than we built in the previous 7.5, for that matter, in the previous 20 years. Let's take hydroelectric power. We have developed more hydroelectric power in these 7.5 years than was developed in any previous administration in history. Let us take hospitals. We find that more have been built in this administration than in the previous administration. The same is true of highways. Let's put it in terms that all of us can understand. We often hear gross national product discussed, and in that respect, may I say that when we compare the growth in this administration with that of the previous administration, that then there was a total growth of 11% over 7 years. In this administration, there's been a total growth of 19% over 7 years. That shows that there's been more growth in this administration than in its predecessor. But let's not put it there. Let's put it in terms of the average family. What has happened to you? We find that your wages have gone up 5 times as much in the Eisenhower administration as they did in the Truman administration. What about the prices you pay? We find that the prices you pay went up 5 times as much in the Truman administration as they did in the Eisenhower administration. What's the net result of this? This means that the average family income went up 15% in the Eisenhower years as against 2% in the Truman years. Now, this is not standing still. But, good as this record is, may I emphasize, it isn't enough. A record is never something to stand on. It's something to build on. And in building on this record, I believe that we have the secret for progress. We know the way to progress. And I think, first of all, our own record proves that we know the way. Senator Kennedy has suggested that he believes he knows the way. I respect the sincerity with which he makes that suggestion. But on the other hand, when we look at the various programs that he offers, they do not seem to be new. They seem to be simply retreads of the programs of the Truman administration which preceded it. And I would suggest that during the course of the evening he might indicate those areas in which his programs are new, where they will mean more progress than we had then. What kind of programs are we for? We are for programs that will expand educational opportunities, that will give to all Americans their equal chance for education, for all of the things which are necessary and dear to the hearts of our people. We are for programs, in addition, which will see that our medical care for the aged is much better handled than it is at the present time. Here again, may I indicate that Senator Kennedy and I are not in disagreement as to the aim. We both want to help the old people. We want to see that they do have adequate medical care. The question is the means. I think that the means that I advocate will reach that goal better than the means that he advocates. I could give better examples, but for whatever it is, whether it's in the field of housing or health or medical care or schools or the development of electric power, we have programs which we believe will move America, move her forward and build on the wonderful record that we have made over these past 7.5 years. Now, when we look at these programs, might I suggest that in evaluating them, we often have a tendency to say that the test of a program is how much you're spending. I will concede that in all the areas to which I have referred, Senator Kennedy would have the federal government spend more than I would have it spend. I costed out the cost of the Democratic platform. It runs a minimum of $13.2 billion a year more than we are presently spending to a maximum of $18 billion a year more than we're presently spending. Now, the Republican platform will cost more, too. It will cost a minimum of $4 billion a year more, a maximum of $4.9 billion a year more than we're presently spending. Now, does this mean that his program is better than ours? Not at all. Because it isn't a question of how much the federal government spends. It isn't a question of which government does the most. It's a question of which administration does the right things. And in our case, I do believe that our programs will stimulate the creative energies of 180 million free Americans. I believe the programs that Senator Kennedy advocates will have a tendency to stifle those creative energies. I believe, in other words, that his programs would lead to the stagnation of the motive power that we need in this country to get progress. The final point that I would like to make is this. Senator Kennedy has suggested in his speeches that we lack compassion for the poor, for the old, and for others that are unfortunate. Let us understand throughout this campaign that his motives and mine are sincere. I know what it means to be poor. I know what it means to see people who are unemployed. I know Senator Kennedy feels as deeply about these problems as I do. But our disagreement is not about the goals for America, but only about the means to reach those goals.
All right, so that was their opening statements for that debate. Again, I'm linking the entire debate to the information on this video. So if you want to take a look at how they handle the questions, which are actually given to them by the 4 reporters that are sitting in front of the stage right there, and they'll give you an idea of how they handled direct scrutiny. Alright, so this next one is going to be a mashup of a number of debates from, I believe, ranging from 1976 to 2008. Okay, here's the debates that you're going to see in this package. Okay, and it's just going to be short highlights from each one. It's usually just a memorable sequence that happened. So one of them is, well, the first one's going to be the 1984 debate between Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale. There's a famous line that Reagan says, which is basically a joke at his own expense. Okay. The next one is from 1976. It's Gerald Ford versus Jimmy Carter, where Ford actually flubs a question about the influence of the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe. The next one there is going to be a vice presidential debate from 1988. This would be Dan Quayle versus Lloyd Bentsen. This has a very famous exchange in it where Quayle compares himself to John F. Kennedy and Bentsen says, "Oh, no, you don't, Sonny." Okay? Next one in the package is from the presidential debate from later in the same campaign. This would be George H.W. Bush versus Michael Dukakis. And it's a moment that's kind of seen as kind of a low-blow dirty trick that was pulled on Dukakis by the moderator. Okay, that's kind of how I see it anyway. That's how a lot of people see it. The next one in this package would be 1992. It's a vice presidential debate between Quayle, Al Gore, and a third man, Rear Admiral James Stockdale, who was the running mate for Ross Perot as a third-party candidate. And the memorable thing from that is Stockdale's opening statement, and you'll see why it's memorable, is because it just goes completely off the rails. Okay? And then the next one after that would be to 2008. It's the vice presidential debate between Joe Biden, the current president now, and the Republican candidate Sarah Palin. Okay? And it'll kind of illustrate for you why some people regard Palin the way they do now. Okay? So let's take a look at these debate highlights.
As we prepare for Monday's debate in Hempstead, New York, we'll leave you now with some memorable debate moments from years past, from gaffes to witty one-liners. Take a look.
I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
I'm sorry, could I just follow? Did I understand you to say, sir, that the Russians are not using Eastern Europe as their own sphere of influence and occupying most of the countries there and making sure with their troops that it's a communist zone, whereas on our side of the line, the Italians and the French are still flirting with possibility?
I don't believe, Mr. Frankel, that the Yugoslavians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. I don't believe that the Romanians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. I don't believe that the Poles consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. Each of those countries is independent, autonomous. It has its own territorial integrity. And the United States does not concede that those countries are under the domination of the Soviet Union. As a matter of fact, I visited Poland, Yugoslavia, and Romania to make certain that the people of those countries understood that the President of the United States and the people of the United States are dedicated to their independence, their autonomy, and their freedom.
Governor Carter, have your response.
Well, in the first place, I'm not criticizing His Holiness the Pope. I was talking about Mr. Ford. The fact is that secrecy has surrounded the decisions made by the Ford administration. In the case of the Helsinki Agreement, it may have been a good agreement at the beginning, but we have failed to enforce the so-called Basket 3 part, which ensures the right of people to migrate, to join their families, to be free, to speak out. The Soviet Union is still jamming Radio Free Europe. Radio Free Europe is being jammed. We've also seen a very serious problem with the so-called Sonnenfeld document, which apparently Mr. Ford has just endorsed, which said that there's an organic linkage between the Eastern European countries and the Soviet Union. And I would like to see Mr. Ford convince the Polish Americans and the Czech Americans and the Hungarian Americans in this country that those countries don't live under the domination and supervision of the Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain. We also have seen Mr. Ford exclude himself from access to the public. He hasn't had a tough cross-examination type press conference in over 30 days. One press conference he had without sound. He's also shown a weakness in yielding to pressure. The Soviet Union, for instance, put pressure on Mr. Ford, and he refused to see a symbol of human freedom recognized around the world, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The Arabs have put pressure on Mr. Ford, and he's yielded, and has permitted a boycott by the Arab countries of American businesses who trade with Israel, or who have American Jews owning or taking part in the management of American companies. His own Secretary of Commerce had to be subpoenaed by the Congress to reveal the names of businesses who were subject to this boycott. They didn't volunteer the information. He had to be subpoenaed. And the last thing I'd like to say is this. This grain deal with the Soviet Union in '72 was terrible, and Mr. Ford made up for it with 3 embargoes, one against our own ally in Japan. That's not the way to run our foreign policy, including international trade.
I don't mean to beat this drum until it has no more sound left in it, but to follow up on Brett Hume's question, when you said that it was a hypothetical situation, it is, sir, after all, the reason that we're here tonight, because you are running not just for vice president. And if you cite the experience that you had in Congress, surely you must have some plan in mind about what you would do if it fell to you to become president of the United States, as it has to so many vice presidents just in the last 25 years or so.
Let me try to answer the question one more time. I think this is the 4th time that I've had this question. And I think that 3 times that I've had this question, and I'll try to answer it again for you as clearly as I can. Because the question you're asking is, what kind of qualifications does Gan Quayle have to be president? What kind of qualifications do I have, and what would I do in this kind of a situation? And what would I do in this situation? I would make sure that the people in the cabinet and the people and the advisors to the president are called in, and I'll talk to them, and I'll work with them. And I will know them on a first-hand basis, because as vice president, I'll sit on the National Security Council. And I'll know them on a first-hand basis because I'm going to be coordinating the drug effort. I'll know them on a first-hand basis because Vice President George Bush is going to recreate the Space Council, and I'll be in charge of that. I will have day-to-day activities with all the people in government. And then, if that unfortunate situation happens, if that situation, which would be very tragic, happens, I will be prepared to carry out the responsibilities of the presidency of the United States of America. And I will be prepared to do that. I will be prepared not only because of my service in the Congress, but because of my ability to communicate and to lead. It is not just age, it's accomplishments, it's experience. I have far more experience than many others that sought the office of vice president of this country. I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Benson?
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy. What has to be done in a situation like that? In a situation like that,
you're only taking time
is to call in the joint.
your own candidate.
That was really uncalled for, Senator.
You're the one that was making the comparisons, Senator. And I'm one who knew him well. And frankly, I think you're so far apart in the objectives you choose for your country that I did not think the comparison was well taken.
For the next 90 minutes, we will be questioning the candidates following a format designed and agreed to by representatives of the 2 campaigns. However, there are no restrictions on the questions that my colleagues and I can ask this evening, and the candidates have no prior knowledge of our questions. By agreement between the candidates, the first question goes to Governor Dukakis. You have 2 minutes to respond. Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life. I don't see any evidence that it's a deterrent, and I think there are better and more effective ways to deal with violent crime. We've done so in my own state, and it's one of the reasons why we have had the biggest drop in crime of any industrial state in America, why we have the lowest murder rate of any industrial state in America. But we have work to do in this nation. We have work to do to fight a real war, not a phony war against drugs, and that's something that I want to lead, something we haven't had over the course of the past many years, even though the Vice President has been, at least allegedly, in charge of that war. We have much to do to step up that war, to double the number of drug enforcement agents, to fight both here and abroad, to work with our neighbors in this hemisphere, and I want to call a hemispheric summit just as soon after the 20th of January as possible to fight that war. But we also have to deal with drug education and prevention here at home. And that's one of the things that I hope I can lead personally as the President of the United States. We've had great success in my own state, and we've reached out to young people and their families and been able to help them by beginning drug education and prevention in the early elementary grades. So we can fight this war and we can win this war. And we can do so in a way that marshals our forces, that provides real support for state and local law enforcement officers who have not been getting that kind of support, do it in a way which will bring down violence in this nation, will help our youngsters to stay away from drugs, will stop this avalanche of drugs that's pouring into the country, and will make it possible for our kids and our families to grow up in safe and secure and decent neighborhoods.
Mr. Vice President, your 1-minute rebuttal.
Well, a lot of what this campaign is about, it seems to me, Bernie, gets to a question of values. And here I do have, on this particular question, a big difference with my opponent. You see, I do believe that some crimes are so heinous, so brutal, so outrageous, and I'd say particularly those that result in the death of a police officer. Those real brutal crimes, I do believe in the death penalty. And I think it is a deterrent. And I believe we need it. And I'm glad that the Congress moved on this drug bill and have finally called for that related to these narcotics drug kingpins. And so we just have an honest difference of opinion. I support it, and he doesn't.
Who am I? Why am I here? I'm not a politician, everybody knows that, so don't expect me to use the language of the Washington Insider. 37 years in the Navy, and only one of them up there in Washington. And now I'm an academic. The centerpiece of my life was the Vietnam War. I was there the day it started. I led the first bombing raid against North Vietnam. I was there the day it ended, and I was there for everything in between. 10 years in Vietnam, aerial combat, and torture. I know things about the Vietnam War better than anybody in the world. I know some things about the Vietnam War better than anybody in the world. And I know how governments, how American governments can be courageous and how they can be callow. And that's important. That's one thing I'm an insider on.
All you got to do is go down Union Street with me in Wilmington and go to Katie's restaurant or walk into Home Depot with me where I spend a lot of time, and you ask anybody in there whether or not the economic and foreign policy of this administration has made them better off in the last 8 years. And then ask them whether there's a single major initiative that John McCain differs with the president on taxes, on Iraq, on Afghanistan, on the whole question of how to help education, on the dealing with health care. Look, the people in my neighborhood, they get it. They get it, and they know they've been getting the short end of the stick. So walk with me in my neighborhood. Go back to my old neighborhood in Claymont, an old steel town, or go up to Scranton with me. These people know the middle class has gotten the short end. The wealthy have done very well. Corporate America has been rewarded. It's time we change it. Barack Obama will change it.
Governor. Say it ain't so, Joe. There you go again, pointing backwards again, though. You prefaced your whole comment with the Bush administration. Now, doggone it, let's look ahead and tell Americans what we have to plan to do for them in the future. You mentioned education, and I'm glad that you did. I know that education you are passionate about, and with your wife being a teacher for 30 years, and God bless her, her reward is in heaven, right? I say, too, with education, America needs to be putting a lot more focus on that, and our schools have got to be really ramped up in terms terms of the funding that they are deserving. Teachers needed to be paid more. I come from a house full of school teachers. My grandma was. My dad, who's in the audience today, he's a school teacher, had been for many years. My brother, who I think is the best school teacher in the year, and there's a shout out to all those third graders at Gladyswood Elementary School. You get extra credit for watching this debate. Education in America has been, in some sense, in some of our states, just accepted to be a little bit lax. And we have got to increase the standards. No Child Left Behind was implemented. It's not doing the job, though. We need flexibility in No Child Left Behind. We need to put more of an emphasis on the profession of teaching. We need to make sure that education in either one of our agendas, I think, absolute top of the line. My kids as public school participants right now, it's near and dear to my heart. I'm very, very concerned about where we're going in education, and we have got to ramp it up and put more attention in that arena.
All right, so you can kind of see a wide variance in the debate styles that we have going on in these little snippets. All right, I have one more example. Alright, so the first thing that you probably notice here is that this does not look like any kind of debate that you're used to, okay? And I can understand that. This is actually the floor of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. What you're going to be seeing here is how they handle debate on the floor, okay? In this case, it's going to be the Conservative Party leader, David Cameron, on one side, and on the other side is Gordon Brown, leader of the Labour Party, who is, at this point, he's also the Prime Minister. There's going to be a very terse exchange between these two guys. There'll be some policy debated here, but a big bone of contention in this debate winds up being calling a new election. Okay, because if you're not familiar with the British system, they don't have a set election day. They will call an election when the need is determined. Okay, sometimes right after having an election. Okay, the most recent election that they had was, I believe, 2 years ago, and it was shortly after they had just had one about 8 months prior. Okay, and when they do hold an election, every seat in the House of Commons is up for grabs. Okay, so you can kind of tell that it becomes a chaotic political system. It's also very chaotic when they do debates. Okay, if you look at the comments on this particular video, there's actually one person who says it seems more like a rap battle than a political debate. Okay, so you'll hear that element going on here. Just go ahead and listen for some of those debate issues that we've been talking about today.
Mr. Speaker, the big question this week is, can we believe what the Prime Minister says? So let us start with his credibility gulf over the election. The Prime Minister was asked this: hand on heart, if the polls showed a 100-seat majority, would you still have called off the election? And he said yes. Does he expect anyone to believe that?
Mr. Speaker, I will take no lectures from the Leader of the Opposition. This summer, I will take no lectures from the Leader of the Opposition, who this summer was for grammar schools, against them, and then for them again. Who was for VAT on airfares and then against it. Who was for parking charges and then against it. Who was for museum charges against it. I will take no lectures from the Leader of the Opposition about these matters.
He's the first Prime Minister in history to flunk an election because he thought he was going to win it. Does he remember writing this? It's in his best-selling book about courage. As far back as I can remember, I've been fascinated by men and women of courage, stories of people who took brave decisions in the service of great causes, especially when more comfortable and far less dangerous alternatives were open to them. Does he realise what a phony he now looks? Has he found a single person who believes his excuses for cancelling the election?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about a clamour for election. I looked at the Downing Street website this morning. Certainly there is a petition There is a petition on the Downing Street website.
Order. Allow the Prime Minister to answer. Prime Minister.
Certainly there is a petition on the Downing Street website calling for an election. It is signed by 26 people. And not one of them are the Conservative front bench. And Mr. Speaker, we will govern in the interests of the people, and what matters to the people is the health service, education, housing, and we will govern to make housing, health and education better in this country.
He's going to have to do better than that. Let's try another claim. Did the draft of the pre-budget report written before the Conservative Party conference include plans for the taxation of non-doms and the raising of inheritance tax? A simple question, yes or no?
I think if he looks back to the summer and interviews given by the Chancellor, he talked about these very issues. And I may say, we have raised the exemption on inheritance tax on 10 occasions since 1997. We have dealt with tax avoidance in relation to non-domicile and non-resident on many occasions since 1997, and we are going to continue to take the right decisions for the country. Now, it's very interesting he's raised inheritance tax on non-domiciles, and I think we can have a detailed discussion of this over the next few weeks. And I think he will have to explain to the House, as we will explain to the House, that on non-domiciles, there are not 150,000 non-domiciles, there are not even 115,000 who could pay this tax, there are only 15,000. And when the Conservatives start to look at the official figures, they will find they can only raise £650 million, not £3.5 billion as they claim. And as for inheritance tax, and again, I welcome the debate we're going to have in the country on this. I welcome the debate. As for inheritance tax, we can exempt estates below £700,000 by 2010 and put money into health and education. The Conservative Party are going to put £2 billion into giving money to those with estates above £950,000, £1 billion to those already rich. Now, when the debate is held in the country, people will choose our policies and reject theirs.
I tell you what, if you've got some questions about our policy, find a bit of courage, discover a bit of bottle, get in your car, go down to Buckingham Palace and call that election. The Prime Minister now tells us he was planning to change the rules on inheritance tax and non-doms all along. He is treating the British people like fools. Next, he'll be telling us how much he admires Margaret Thatcher.
All right, so hopefully that was a little bit mildly entertaining, but at the same time get you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of how to handle an argument. Okay? So, that's going to do it for this week. There's a few things on the agenda for this week. Number one, we have, most important here is the classical argument is going to be workshopped this week, second time. This is the proofreading and editing workshop. It also has to be turned in this week. Okay? Here's how it's going to work. If you go to eCampus, there is going to be a folder on the eCampus menu for major essays/assignments. It's going to be under there. You're going to go under there. There's going to be a link for argument 1. Click that. Under that, you will see the link for turning in this essay. I'll tell you exactly how I want it turned in. Okay, that link is going to show up on Thursday. Okay, that is intentional because that way you're not just turning it in sight unseen without having anybody give you proofreading feedback on it. Okay, I do want these proofread and workshop the second time. Okay, so Thursday that link will open. The essay itself is due Friday. Now, what I want you guys to be doing this week on your workshopping, you want to be focusing on proofreading, grammar, spelling, and mechanics. Okay. This is all about polish. Okay, make sure everything is looking good. Make sure everything's spelled right. Make sure all the grammar rules are being followed. Okay. In addition to that, the usual stuff. The discussion board will have a new topic this week. You'll also have Mind Tapped. You should be working on. As far as the exercise for this lecture, again, I want you guys to post your comments on those debate samples that I showed you. Okay, give me an idea of what you're noticing from the discussion we've had about debate in this particular session, what you're seeing applied in those debates. Okay, what kind of stuff are you seeing in those? And also, you could also comment about how effective you think one debater is over the other. Okay, especially in that quick snippet of the highlights of other debates. Okay, some of them are going to be harder than others, but you can kind of get an impression. Okay. Other than that, that's all I got for you this week. Next week we're going to start talking about evaluative essays. I will see you guys then. Thanks for watching.